the 60s. A hippie, peace-loving decade full of good music, good times, and drugs. It was the age of flower power, and the young people of the time were set on creating a countercultural society that was separated from the conservative, war-hardened society that came before them. The 60s saw the rise of some of the most renowned creative minds the world had ever seen. It was an artistic revolution, and its impact is still being felt to this day. Arguably, the most prolific of all was the music. A decade that transitioned from beach vibes to psychedelic music to the introduction of rock and roll that would take the next few decades by storm. The 60s had it all. The Beatles, Beach Boys, the Mamas and the Papas, the Jimi Hendrix Experience, Bob Dylan, the Supremes, Led Zeppelin, Aretha Franklin, The Doors, The Who, Pink Floyd, Simon and Garfunkel, Creedence Clearwater Revival, James Brown, Cream, Ray Charles. They all thrived during the 60s, and that is just to name a few. It truly was a time of experimentation and creativity. That was until December 6, 1969, when the counterculture society realised everything was not all sunshine and rainbows and Lucy in the sky with diamonds, but the world was a very real and violent place. Violence would always surface no matter how hard the decade tried to mask it with music, booze, and drugs. That was the day the Rolling Stones held a free concert at the Altamont Speedway in California to conclude their nationwide tour of the US. This is the story of the Altamont Free Concert. It was 1969 and the Rolling Stones were broke. They hadn't toured since 1966 and their funds were running out. The booze, drugs and women were not going to fund themselves, and a new injection of dough was very much needed. So they hit the road. Touring was what they knew, and it was what they were good at. Performing was in their blood. Mick Jagger, the band's energetic frontman, brought on a camera crew to follow the Stones as they toured the United States. They were the fucking Rolling Stones, and any music fan on the planet would give an arm and a leg to watch the film on their rock and roll heroes. Okay, they may not have given an arm and a leg, but they'd pay money. Along with the hiked up ticket prices that would ultimately play a part in the free concert at the end of the tour, the band would be swimming in cash by the time they boarded the plane back to their rock and roll pads in London. Despite the band was still rusty from their 3-year break from concerts, the tour was a huge success as they sold out venues across the US. However, the high ticket prices had been the biggest critique of the band. Many critics had claimed that they had ripped off their fans by charging a far higher price for tickets than what was average at the time. Although the hardcore Rolling Stones fans would have paid anything to see them, there were still many that thought the Stones were taking advantage of their fame and influence. So in true rockstar fashion, the idea for a free concert to give back to the fans was born. But not really. The concert was actually inspired by the overwhelming success of Woodstock, a revolutionary music festival that was held on the East Coast of New York in August that year. An estimated 400,000 people attended the event to witness the star-studded lineup in what would be the pinnacle of the peace-loving music era. A star-studded lineup that did not feature the Rolling Stones. They missed out on the biggest festival the world had ever seen, and the only thing to do now was to throw another free concert. This time on the West Coast. They wanted a piece of the counterculture action, and why the hell not? They were the Rolling Stones after all, and they could do as they pleased.
Rubbish.
There's a question here on the right, Mick.
I read in one of the papers that you'll be giving a free concert in San Francisco.
We are doing a free concert in San Francisco.
When?
On December 6th. And the location is not Golden Gate Park, unfortunately, but it's somewhere adjacent to it, which is a bit larger. It's creating a sort of microcosmic society, you know, which it sets an example to the rest of America as to how one can behave in large gatherings.
This is Mel Belli, the lawyer.
A free concert was planned on December 6, 1969, would be held in San Francisco. It was to be the last concert of the tour, a final hurrah. However, planning the event did not go as it should have. At all. It had originally been intended that the concert would be held at Golden Gate Park, but these plans fell through as the city government did not want the trouble associated with a free concert. The next venue was then chosen to be Sears Point in Sonoma. Everything seemed to be in place until December 4th, 2 days before the concert. Upon hearing that the Rolling Stones would be releasing a film, the venue owners requested $100,000 payment. The concert organisers and the Stones were not having it, and decided that they would rather change venues again than pay the fee. Luckily, Dick Carter, the owner of a local speedway, offered up his venue for free, and alas, the Altamont Speedway was set in stone. The small and humble racetrack was located 60 miles east of San Francisco, and thus was away from the city. Not ideal for the Rolling Stones, but a welcomed result for the local government. Due to the fact that the concert organisers only had 2 days to organise the event, it was quite obviously done poorly. The stage was only 4 feet off the ground, the lighting and the sound was ordinary, and there was a severe lack of facilities, i.e. toilets and running water. From the outset, things were not going well. By the morning of the day the concert was to take place, more than 100,000 people had already arrived at Altamont Speedway and had not delayed their partying. In no time, drugs and booze were circulating around the crowd. Mick Jagger had made it very apparent that he did not want any governmental authority at Altamont, and it appeared that he got his wish, although I highly doubt that it was because of his request, and more so because of the authorities not having any time for the hippie, drug-infested concert. Nonetheless, the band chose their own security, and they picked the Hells Angels, a violent and hard motorcycle gang that had no interest in anything but booze, their motorcycles, and choosing to do as they please. You may be wondering what the logic was behind choosing a biker gang as security. Well, it came from a suggestion from the Grateful Dead, another band that was playing in Altamont that was close with the Rolling Stones. They had apparently used them before and claimed they only had to provide them with beer as payment. It was a win-win situation for the Stones, and they soon employed the Angels to keep order at the concert. They rolled up to Altamont with little regard for the concert goers. Anyone that walked in front of their Harley Davidsons were risking their own lives. Don't fuck with the bikes and you'll be fine. Tensions began to build early on as concert goers clashed with the Angels. The bikers started to beat anyone that got on their nerves with pool cues. The event quickly turned violent and a chaotic atmosphere began to loom over Altamont. This was before a band had even started playing. The lineup for the day was Santana, Jefferson Airplane, the Flying Burrito Brothers, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, and the Rolling Stones to cap it off. The Grateful Dead, who were pivotal in the organisation of the event, did not even play their set, as they were scared of the violence that was brewing in the crowd. Many accounts recall that Martin Balin of Jefferson Airplane got into a tussle with an Angel on the stage whilst playing their set. Grace Slick, singer of Jefferson Airplane, remembers during an interview with Rolling Stone magazine that, "I couldn't see anything. I saw bodies moving vaguely over on my left, which is where Marty Balin was. And I went back to drums and said to Spencer Dryden, 'What the hell is going on?' And he said, 'The Angels are kind of beating up Marty. What happened is they were messing with one of our crew. Marty objected, and one of the Angels said something back to Marty. And Marty said, 'Fuck you.' And the guy knocked Marty down while we were singing and said, 'You never say fuck you to an Angel.' And Marty said it again. Our crew had to pull Angels off Marty. And I thought, well, this is not a very good start to the day." The fight then moved off stage, where Rex Jackson of the Grateful Dead tried to break it up. He was subsequently knocked out as the Angels didn't take kindly to his interference in the fight. It's fair to say that the Grateful Dead had good reason to leave the event, as quickly as they could. The Woodstock ethos was not something worth being knocked out for. The stage was only 4 feet off the ground and very easy to get on should someone try. There was a small wide fence that separated the crowd from the stage, so the Angels had to become the main obstacle. Anyone that tried to get on the stage was met with violence. The Angels were more likely concerned with their public tough guy image than actually protecting the bands on stage. It was something of pride, not something of honour. It didn't make matters any better when concert goers would touch the Angels' bikes. Whether it be accidental or on purpose, those bikes were the most important thing in their lives, and anyone that dared touch it would be met with violent consequences. Denise Jukes, the lead singer of the Ace of Cups, who was also 6 months pregnant, was rushed to hospital after an empty beer bottle hit her in the head. It was thrown into the crowd and she ended up with a fractured skull. She was one of the many to be taken away before the Rolling Stones had even taken the stage. As it was the 60s, drugs and booze was prevalent at Altamont. It is said that a bad batch of acid was passed around by the Hells Angels. Mind you, they had also been taking it. There was also LSD laced with speed supposedly, 2 synthetic psychedelic drugs that gave those who took it, well, quite frankly, an unstable state of mind. It was chaos, but this was the 60s, man. Nothing bad can happen if you just go with the flow. Peace and love. As the early evening came, it was finally time for the headline act, the Rolling Stones. Mick Jagger and the rest of the band bounded on stage. Tensions were already high, but they could quell it. They were the greatest rock band on the planet after all.
The greatest rock and roll band in the world, the Rolling Stones!
And to begin with, it worked. The concert became what it was supposed to be about, the music. Concert goers focused on the music rather than the violence, and thus the Angels postponed their beatings for the meantime. Jumpin' Jack Flash and Carol went by with relative peace and calm. Their third song, however, Sympathy for the Devil, had to be stopped as fights broke out near the stage. They restarted, and relative calm was restored for The Sun is Shining, Stray Cat Blues, and Love in Vain. The next song, Under My Thumb, would change the course of the music industry forever, and arguably bring an end to the 60s as a zeitgeist single-handedly. Among the crowd was Meredith Hunter, a young, free-spirited 18-year-old. He had made the trip to Altamont in his dad's Mustang with his girlfriend Patty Bredoft, and they were looking forward to a day listening to good music and enjoying the vibe. He wasn't necessarily fussed about the Rolling Stones, but felt that the Woodstock of the West was too good of an opportunity to miss out on. The third passenger in the car was a pistol Meredith had packed to protect himself. His sister had warned him that the concert was dangerous and detailed the racial violence that was rife in America. Whilst it was enough to convince him to arm himself, it wasn't enough to stop him from going. He was young and naive and saw no issue with attending the concert. At the concert, Patty was soon to notice that things were not quite right. After watching the opening few bands, she decided to take refuge in the Mustang, as the violence emanating at the stage left her fearful for her safety. She was soon met by Meredith. Patty asked if they could leave, voicing her concerns about the violence, but Meredith wanted to return to the stage. The Rolling Stones were about to play. He had come back to grab his pistol because, like Patty, he had noticed the violence. Patty begrudgingly followed Meredith back to the stage. The Rolling Stones were up to their sixth song, Love in Vain, when the pair found themselves up near the front of the crowd. Still unable to view the Rolling Stones completely, Meredith decided to stand on a speaker box to gain a better view of the show. A few moments passed before an angel noticed a young man in a bright lime suit standing somewhere he should not be. He tried to pull Meredith down, but Meredith shook him off. The angel then grabbed him again, with more force this time, and threw Meredith to the ground. Meredith got up and pushed him back, so the angel retaliated with a right hook to his mouth. Soon there were several bikers surrounding Meredith as he attempted to run away by submerging himself in the chaos of the crowd. The angels pursued and eventually caught up with Meredith, surrounding him once more as they began to assault him. Meredith, having come prepared for an altercation like the one he had found himself in, shook free from the angels once more and began to flee. He then pulled out his pistol that was hidden under his jacket tucked into his suit pants and turned around to show them his piece. Alan Passaro, an angel that had witnessed the altercation, jumped from the stage, pulled out his own weapon, a large knife, and jumped on Meredith, stabbing him twice. Meredith staggered out of the crowd and to the side of the stage where the angels began to beat him once more. Meredith was stabbed at least 4 more times. Patty tried to break up the violent attack, but was powerless in fighting off the burly bikers. Eventually, another concert goer managed to get in between Meredith and the bikers. The angel told him that there was no use, he would die anyway. They knew full well they had murdered the teenager. By the time Meredith was taken to the emergency tent, it was too late. His wounds were so severe that the medical staff were unable to keep him alive until he was airlifted away. Meredith Hunter passed away before they could get him on the helicopter. He was only 18 years old. Most concert goers were completely unaware a murder had just taken place right in front of the stage. Not even the Stones were aware, despite the fact they stopped the song, Under My Thumb, several times as they witnessed the scuffle right in front of them. They were completely oblivious to the fact that one of their fans had just been brutally murdered. The Rolling Stones proceeded to finish their set before heading straight for the helicopter and flying away, leaving Altamont in their dust. They were on a plane back to London later that night, leaving their tour manager Sam Cutler to clean up their mess. He dramatically recalls a basement meeting he had with the Angels discussing the disaster, a meeting he said he feared for his life. News of the concert was played on television and radio the next day. It wasn't until then that the attendees realised the magnitude of the catastrophe. In total, 4 people died. Meredith Hunter, 2 people that were killed in a hit-and-run accident, and another that drowned whilst crossing a river to get to the concert. Hundreds of people required medical attention. Over 300,000 people attended. An angel called into a radio station voicing his opinion of the events that took place a day prior.
Ain't nobody gonna kick my motorcycle, and they might think because they're in a crowd of 300,000 people that they can do it and get away with it. But when you're standing there looking at something that's your life and everything you got is invested in that thing and you love that thing better than you love anything in the world, and you see a guy kick it, you know who he is. You're gonna get him. And you know what? They got.
In fact, the Angels were so furious that they were portrayed as the bad guys that they put out a hit on Mick Jagger. They wanted to hit him at his Long Island estate and planned on travelling there by boat. Fortunately for Jagger, bad weather caused the Angels' boat to capsize and he was spared. The Angel that stabbed Meredith Hunt was put on trial and found not guilty by reason of self-defence. It is fair to say that the legacy of Altamont has been felt widespread and severely. The feeling of the peace-loving 60s was never the same again. Society lost its innocence when Meredith died, and it would not be regained. Life was not as free-flowing and peaceful as everyone had once thought. The anarchist archetype that was present at Woodstock could not be replicated at Altamont, and everyone understood this to be the case. The Rolling Stones have very rarely spoken out about the day that brought the 60s to an end.